Welcome back to the Witcher lore series. Emperor Emir var Emreis rarely shows any emotion, but today he cannot help but display a slight hint of a smile as he watched over the mighty Nilfgaardian army center group camp. Tents of black and gold span for miles and miles even past the horizon. The winter snows have begun thawing with the first spring breezes, and the gears of the Imperial war engine, after staying idle for an entire season of frost, has now started revving once again. The Emperor was not just hibernating during the winter time. He was busy planning out the next steps in his grand invasion of the north. His army was split into 3 groups, and he devised out very different plans for each. The Eastern Army group deployed in northern Edirne was to push up to the Pontar Valley, take the city of Hague to secure Temeria's eastern flank, and then advance into Kedwin. The Western Army group, led by Verdinian Duke Joachim de Wet, was to march north and take Sedaris and Gorsvelen, thus cutting off aid from Redania and the free city of Novigrad. The largest army center group has the primary task of conquering Temeria, and most importantly, the capture of the Temerian capital, Vizima. In total, Nilfgaardian forces amounted up to 300,000 men, more than 3 times of what was deployed in the First Northern Wars. An offensive of this scale was never before seen. Initially, the Verdinian Western Army group led by Duke de Wet made significant progress against King Ethane of Stradarius, as they outnumbered their foe 2-1. But their atrocities committed against the locals along the way sparked widespread rage and indignation. In a single month, anti-imperial guerrilla forces in Verdun and Stradarius doubled as the common people joined the fight against oppressive invaders. If this was not enough bad news for Duke de Wet, the Jarl of the Skellige Islands, Krakon Crate, sent his seaborne warriors to constantly raid the western shores of Verdun. With Stradarius soldiers ahead, guerrilla forces behind, and Skellige warriors on their flank, the Western Army group was attacked from all directions. Capturing Sedaris and Gorsvelen was now impossible, and thus the supply routes between Redania and Temeria remained open. In northern Edirne, the Nilfgaardian Eastern Army group is also halted. Earlier in winter, in a move of sheer tactical brilliance, King Foltest commanded an elite Temerian regiment to reinforce the defenses of the Edirnian city of Hague. This was all unbeknownst to the Nilfgaardians, who expected Hague to be held only by injured, weak Edirnian soldiers that would surrender within days. The Nilfgaardians could have chosen to siege Hague, but they would have to worry about Kedwin swooping down south and destroying their flank. For they would have had nowhere to hide in the flat Pontar Valley from a strong Cadwini cavalry charging down at them. The Nilfgaardians could also choose to invade Kedwin instead, but the thought of having an elite regiment of Temerians flank them from Hague was cutting their supply lines from behind made them hesitate. As a result, the entire Eastern Army group remained halted in northern Edirne. The news of Nilfgaard's halted advance on both the eastern and western fronts spread throughout the north, demystifying the seemingly invincible Imperial army. This inspiring message prompted more and more northerners to join the fight against Nilfgaard, resulting in the creation of volunteers armies, such as the Mahakam Volunteer Army, with dwarves hailing from the Mahakam Mountains, the Free Company, a volunteer army from Kavir, and more famously, the PFI, or the Poor Fucking Infantry Divisions from Temeria. The PFI were entirely made up of inexperienced volunteers and conscripts whose combat skills were so non-existent that they were just each given a pike to hold and told to point it at Nilfgaardian cavalry whenever they charged. They were essentially designated as meat shields for the Temerian infantry and archers by absorbing the impact of a heavy shock cavalry charge. Emperor Emir became more and more concerned as the Temerian army continues to get replenished both in terms of manpower and supplies as a result of his failure on the eastern and western fronts. time was simply not on his side anymore. So the Emperor ordered Marshal Menno Cohorn to seek and fight a decisive battle with Temeria and utterly shatter the northern forces with one single deadly blow. The village of Brenna, located around 50 miles north of Maribor, sits by the bank of the Chotla River, which flows with water coming from Lake Vizima, about 150 miles upstream. Brenna was never known for anything. Its timber was ordinary, and its fishing business was at best mediocre. Not even a single man of influence was born here that could have carried the name of Brenna into a history book. In its normal days, Brenna had a humble population of around 300 people. Its population now? 33,000. It serves as the base of operations of the main Temerian army who were just deployed here a day ago, after the entire Nilfgaardian Center army group suddenly started bolting towards Vizima at full speed. King Foltest was certainly shocked by this action, but he quickly decided that the Imperials will have to be stopped at Brenna. He will not allow them to take a single step more towards Vizima. The clash happened just before noon, the deafening battle cries and clunking sounds of steel nearly drowning the small village of Brenna. Nilfgaardians charged, but Temerians repelled them, so they charged again and were once again beat back. But they charged again and again relentlessly. But no matter how overwhelming the golden sun of Nilfgaard was, the Temerian lily, though seemingly fragile, managed to hold its ground. The infantry clash at the center just kept on grinding, and there was not a clear winner. To break this stalemate, Nilfgaard's Marshal Cohorn ordered the elite 4th Cavalry Division as well as the Elven Cavalry Regiment to charge the Temerian left flank, which was seemingly defended by just civilians holding pikes and farming forks. They had no uniform and no armor whatsoever. Marshal Cohorn thought this was a godsend. A broken Temerian left flank would expose the Temerian center to deadly rear charges, and the battle would be over real soon. So what is this strange-looking Temerian regiment defending this left flank? The poor, bucking infantry. That's right, they managed to repel attack after attack from the most elite Nilfgaardian horsemen and inflicted heavy damage onto them. The PFI really had nothing to lose, so they fought like demons, swearing so loudly and spilling so much blood that many Nilfgaardian horsemen were so horrified that they just turned their backs and ran. In fact, the Elven Cavalry Regiment completely shattered after several terribly failed charges. While Marshal Cohorn was trying to figure out why his cavalry was taking so awfully long to break the Temerian left flank, he felt the ground shaking as he looked to the hills on his left. First, the banners rose from the horizon, one being a white eagle and the other a black Pegasus. Then, an entire line of cavalry, spears at the ready, galloping at full speed towards the Imperial lines. The reinforcements from the Redanian Royal Army and the Kedwini Dun banner has arrived. Cohorn yelled retreat, but it was way too late. His infantry was fixated at the center, and his cavalry was completely pinned and disorganized on the flanks. It was not too long before he himself was pierced by a spear. The PFI has bought time for one hell of a miracle. The Battle of Brenna will forever be one for the books. After the battle, the armies of the Northern Alliance started pushing disorganized Nilfgaardians back on all three fronts. Cities were liberated one after one. Vengerberg, Aldersburg, Maribor, Mayana, Bruges, Dillingen. The few Imperials that managed to escape sailed back across the Aruga to Angren and Sintra. The only cities that remained under Nilfgaardian control were the three strongholds in Verden. But even those three strongholds were forced to be given up after the peace talks. On April 2nd, the Peace of Sintra was signed by the northern monarchs and Emperor Emir, signifying the end of the Second Nilfgaard-Nordling War. The Emperor of Nilfgaard is devastated and humiliated, his internal opposition gaining significant power and is now threatening his throne. But let me remind you that this isn't just any monarch. This is Emir Var Emre's. He understands that his empire was defeated. But the North does not get away with no scars. In fact, the North is much more economically devastated due to significant loss of life and infrastructure after being the main battleground for the largest, bloodiest war in history. Emir understands this perfectly. For now, he will have to deal with the internal opposition and silence them to secure his throne. But as for the North, the Emperor will never abandon his grand vision for unifying the continent. He vows to come back and make the Pontar run red with the blood of his foes.